Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this second symposium panel, part of the Adirondacks for All Identity and Environmental Justice series. This series has been jointly presented by the Adirondack Experience, the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, the Wild Center, and the Nature Conservancy. A quick reminder for those that were unable to attend last night's symposium panel, but this past summer, the Adirondacks for All program series opened space for dialogue around topics including historical preservation, social justice, climate change, and environmental policy. The symposium is featuring 3 roundtable discussions that build on those conversations and provide further opportunity for public engagement with critical issues that have relevance well beyond the Adirondacks themselves. Project collaborators approach the Adirondacks for All initiative as a long-term endeavor to work towards a more inclusive, accessible, and protected Adirondack Park. The symposium series continues this evening with an exploration of accessibility and inclusivity in relation to Adirondack Park. The panelists featured in this roundtable discussion have spent considerable time and energy bridging the access and equity gap in the Adirondacks, connecting Black and Indigenous youth, among others, with an environmental and cultural heritage that should rightly transcend cultural, racial, and economic boundaries. My name is Eric Reardon. I'm the project director, and I would like to start this evening's program by acknowledging that the Adirondack Experience is situated on the Aboriginal territories of the Mohawk and Abenaki people. Indigenous people continue to live in this region and practice their teachings and lifeways. This roundtable discussion, entitled Wilderness for All, features a conversation between Annie Cree, Benita Law-Diao, and Stephanie Morningstar. Stephanie Morningstar is Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk with ancestors rooted in 6 nations of the Grand River Territory and Europe. She is a plant nerd, medicine tender, bridge builder, soil and seed steward, scholar, student, and earth worker dedicated to embodying her decolonial values through the practice of biocultural restoration. She regenerates soil, reintegrates mycelium, and restores and restores ecosystems at the Sky World Apothecary Farm. She teaches about connection between plants, land, human, culture, and kin through a decolonial lens at Seed and Soil and Spirit School. And she is the co-founder and Relationships and Reciprocity co-director at the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, where she collaborates with comrades, ancestors, and allies to liberate land and redistribute land-based wealth with and for Indigenous, Black, and people of color. Stephanie's work in her PhD program at SUNY ESF Center for Native Peoples and the Environment is focused on biocultural restoration in Kanien'kehá:ka and Haudenosaunee territory. Benita Law-Diao is a New York State licensed public health nutritionist and dietitian. She served for 32 years with the New York State Department of Health. During her career, she was a public health nutritionist, a contract manager, and a program research specialist. Throughout her life, Ms. Law-Diao has held a strong passion for the environment and sustainable living. Ms. Law-Diao is also the outdoor Afro leader for Albany in upstate New York. She advises Eagle Island Camp in Saranac Lake. She is also a member of the Albany Riverfront Collaborative and works to forge robust civic partnerships necessary to nurture a river-connected and sustaining community with a vibrant and interdependent economy, culture, and landscape. As a Cornell Cooperative Extension Albany County Master Gardener, she works with the community on a variety of sustainable agriculture and beautification projects. In May of 2022, Ms. Law-Diao was appointed to the Adirondack Park Agency, the first African-American to serve on that board. Annie Cree is a Mohawk of Akwesasne and part of the Bear Clan, wife to Evan Cree and proud mother of 4. Annie is the director of outdoor programming for Yakwasutse, youth fitness and youth coach, and team trainer for a few local minor sports teams. Working at the IYF, she's able to offer land-based activities such as hiking, biking, canoeing, and snowshoeing. She also offers family-oriented programming and workshops to help educate parents and children together on safety issues, wellness, cooking classes, and traditional teachings and workshops. Annie has been a youth mentor for over a decade, helping local youth with college prep, finding jobs, and sometimes just being there to listen to what they have to say. Annie has also developed a running program that is offered in Akwesasne to the 5 local schools that helps prepare runners for events, including the Ottawa Marathon Kids Run. Last year, there were 65 kids total that participated in the program and 28 that attended the marathon. Annie is also a member of the Akwesasne Suicide Prevention Committee, the Akwesasne Coalition for Community Empowerment, and the Community Health and Social Educators Committee, all of which help to bring wellness to the community. Throughout this evening's presentation, I would invite all audience members to please feel free to submit any questions you may have through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And I would like to start this discussion program by just asking each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and your relationship to the Adirondacks. Annie, would you mind perhaps going first?
Sure. I'm Annie Cree, as he said, the Director of Outdoor Programming for Akwesasne Youth Fitness. Eric, you did really good that time. Very proud. The Adirondacks, we discussed it over the weeks, and every time it came up and we talked about it, it changed a little bit. Like, there's so much there that kind of I tie into over there, like it just the connection, you know. I know I talked about growing up and playing sports out there all the time, and then as I got older, hiking, bringing my kids, now bringing a lot more of my programming there. There's just something there that I just feel like our community needs to see. You know, there's just so much out there, and it's not just the hiking, it's not just the 46 high peaks, it's like even the little trails nobody hikes on, you know. There's some kind of connection there, and I feel like there's something there for everybody. And it's to be active, but I also feel like it heals, you know. It heals you. And right now our community is starting to go into a phase where they're starting to heal themselves. And I notice a lot more of our community members are out there and hiking, biking, kayaking. Like I said, it's incredible to see, and you can tell that this is something that they need, even though it's not far from us, but it is something that is important for us to make that connection to those areas, regrounding ourselves in that part of the land. You know, there's a lot more medicines you find out there. It's like just the whole Adirondack as a whole. That is like something we really need right now.
Thanks so much, Annie. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Stephanie Morningstar, Mohawk Turtle Clan. My family grew up on my mom's side at Six Nations in between Hamilton and Six Nations in Ontario. And I ended up growing up in Buffalo, New York. And the Adirondacks has always had a sort of a mystique in our lives. I think we were, you know, as a young person, I did not see myself or my people reflected in that space. Although the very word Adirondacks comes from our languages, so we know that we've been in that space. And one of the things I think that, and one of the reasons I said yes to this opportunity to meet with these really amazing people, Benita and Annie, who are doing such amazing work in community, is because I think that is time to heal. And one of the things that we need to heal is our cross-cultural relationships in the Adirondacks on this land. It is a very healing place. As you mentioned, Annie, there's medicines there. There's a huge legacy and history of our presence there. And somehow amidst the last couple hundred years, there's been an erasure of that experience, and then a sort of remaking of our identities, and sort of almost a, that past tensified sepia toned way that continues to erase Indigenous people's presence from the land for many very specific reasons. You can see that in my work, probably, as you can see that a lot of what I do is about cross-cultural restoration and restoring our relationships with each other and with the land. So as we get into this conversation, I'm sure that it'll come up, but just to say that, this is not a place that we don't have a relationship with. In fact, we, like I said, are responsible for the naming of this place. And there's a lot of material culture, material remains that are still there, but there's also an active living presence. We've never left, right? We're not just, relegated to museums and pot shards and, archaeological digs and paleoecology. We've never left. We maybe have been forcibly removed and had to, go to other different communities, but our relationship with this land has always been intact, and we can see that throughout history. So for us, it's about really approaching this story of what it means to be Kanekihaga or Haudenosaunee or Abenaki at Odanak or whoever we may be, and saying we still exist, we're still here, and we really would like to be able to build, rebuild, and reclaim our relationship with this place.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And Benita, please tell us a little about yourself and your journey and relationship in the Adirondacks.
Well, I grew up in an urban area. I was born in Queens. I grew up between Queens and the Bronx. I went to high school in Manhattan. And my dad's family's from rural Alabama. My mom's family's from rural Virginia. So I get to visit these places. And I loved being in green spaces. And I guess I had my grandmother and her sisters, they were always connected to nature. And even though they lived in New York City, you'd see that they never, left that love for the green space. But as a kid, I yearned to be in green places and spaces. I had no idea that the Adirondacks existed until I became an adult. But growing up, I realized that it cleansed my soul from an early time in my life, just being in nature. So just seeing a lot of the hurt and tragedy in our communities, I wanted to be able to grow up and do something to give back. That's why I got into public health. I wanted to find a way to deal with the health issues that I was seeing in my community. There's so many things that we seem to be the number one in cancer, the number one in chronic disease or whatever. We're always at the top. And so that's how I got into public health. But then when I originally came into the Adirondacks and started visiting, for me, I was assigned to the Adirondacks for my job. And a lot of people thought, that, they don't want to go up in the Adirondacks, especially in the winter. But for me, it was such a blessing to have that as my territory, because the minute I saw the mountains, the stress would drop. And no matter what task I had, to be in the Adirondacks was a blessing for me. And when I had time, I just wander around and learn about new places and spaces. And I wanted to bring my kids there. When you talk about erasure, for me, Stephanie, that hits home for us, because once I started to come to the Adirondacks, I wanted to bring friends, and none of them wanted to come because they didn't think we belonged there. And men in particular, Black men, felt really uncomfortable working or coming into the Adirondacks. The Black men that I know who work for the health department, they very rarely went into the Adirondacks by themselves. They always had someone else in the department with them. So for me, that's been the journey to be able to learn more about the Adirondacks, to expose other people. And I really care about the Adirondacks. I've grown to love it. I've, always wanted to live there. And well, this is the closest way I've gotten there.
Thank you so much, Benita, Annie, and Stephanie, for sharing a little bit about your journey and your sort of perception of the Adirondacks. And this leads me to this question of, really taking a critical look at how the benefits of Adirondack preservation are or are not distributed across socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, or cultural lines. And so I wonder if each of you could speak to, your sense of, who really has benefited from the preservation achievement of Adirondack Park, and how can we make sure that, we are creating a space, working towards a space that is for everyone, and everyone does feel welcome, included in the Adirondack story, to go along with Stephanie's restoration.
Well, people who have money seem to be the ones that have benefited, because even poor whites in the Adirondacks are suffering. They don't know the history of the Adirondacks, and it's interesting how recently I was with a woman who grew up in the Adirondacks, and she had no idea that people of color don't feel. In fact, she was a DEC employee. And she was with us when we were doing a first-time camper program. And she was just stunned to hear the stories and to hear that people felt uncomfortable and people were discriminated. And she grew up in the Adirondacks. And she would tell us stories about, the poverty she saw in the Adirondacks and not being able to access certain things. And so, and then I guess, when people see that, for someone, I guess for the whites that live in the Adirondacks, and to see all the money that comes there, and yet they're doing not very well. And then, I could see the resentment, with some of the things that we're trying to do, because they've got issues that aren't being addressed. And we're trying to create equity and inclusiveness. And yet the things that have been affecting them all these years are still not being addressed. So, yeah. So I guess they see the primary benefactors are tourists and people with money.
And I'll just build on that, agreeing with you, Benita, and also just going back to the reason for why Adirondack Park was created was because of deforestation, right? And the logging that happened in the Adirondacks before it was turned into the myth of the forever wild, right? And we can talk about that a little bit as well, moving into this conversation a little deeper, is there's a huge colonial history that overrode in some ways and overshadowed and unfortunately extracted a lot of the hemlock and all of the different forest products that are now, right? Like they're called forest products. So thinking about our relationships with sustainable relationships with land and regenerative relationships with land and forests, and what the Adirondacks has been sort of assumed to be for Indigenous people, for example, as like only a hunting territory or whatever. But there's a lot of that history that really line the pockets of select families who still to this day have a lot of generational wealth and control a lot of the lands and things like that around the whole territory. So my answer, I think, would be, it's generations of people who have benefited, right? But they are all the wealthy, and they keep passing on that and not redistributing that wealth gained from these territories and keeping that into the maintaining that within their own within their own economies, I guess I would say. So that would be one thing that I would answer. And yeah, I'll just leave it there for now. I mean, I'm sure I'm just adding to what Benita said because I agree with everything that you also said.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, and just a little bit more to it. I know we had talked about it before, how, you know, it's a lot of finance, people with lots of money, and a colleague and I had, one day we were out hiking and then we noticed the names of the mountains, you know, and then that's when we kind of went back and started researching them and the actual original, the original names that were given to the mountains, and how over the years that when people got there and bought land and they just decided, I'm gonna name this mountain after me, or I'm gonna name this mountain after this person, you know? So you see a lot of that, and a lot of the history of what the actual names are. It's hard to find some of them, you know, and then some of them, they talk about it a lot, and I always use Mount Joe for reference. You know, Mount Joe is right there at the Low J. You know, it's a nice little quick hike for whoever's looking. But if you really look into it, that name was changed from Bear Mountain, you know, and the original name was given by the Gunnageha people, and they named it Bear Mountain because of most likely there was probably a lot of bears there. A lot of our names that are given, it's not given, they're given because of something that sticks out in that area, you know. So every name is has a reasoning or something to do with that area. So we started researching, and we're looking at more and more mountains and areas that have had their names changed over the years because of, like you said, people come in with wealth and are able and capable of being able to go and change that history because they can buy the change, you know. So yeah, it is. And you had also said about the dynamics and the changing over time, you know, like it has changed over time, but I feel like we are slowly changing, you know, like the three of us sitting here, our work is trying to bring it back for us, you know, for our people, our cultures to feel comfortable there, you know, to set those boundaries where we are capable of, you know, Benita comfortably bringing groups there, and me being able to bring my youths there, you know, and feel a sense of belonging, you know. I spend a lot of time there, mostly in the woods, not like touristy, but I'm either on the water or in the woods or on a mountain or, you know, looking at plants. So to me, I can go there and feel comfortable. And I just, like, that is our goal, to make sure that more and more people start to feel comfortable. And I think the more and more people like Benita and Stephanie and you, Eric, we can bring that dynamic and we can help start making that change. And I know there's more people out there that are doing that now, you know, so I think that there is starting to be a change in dynamic, you know.
With that said, I know the audience would love to hear a little bit more about the work each of you individually are doing and the way it intersects with these issues of access, inclusivity, and belonging in the Adirondacks and beyond. So I'd love to hear each of you speak to how your work engages with those issues.
I can share a little bit about what I do, and specifically with regards to the Adirondacks. As you can see from my long bio, really what I'm interested in is writing a new story, really understanding who we are in relationship to the land and each other, and understanding that we're all here, we're not going anywhere. And I'm an herbalist. It's something that I've done for most of my adult life. And what I'm really interested in is healing and understanding through that modality. We look at the root cause of every symptom, not just what's happening in the public health, Benita. I'm sure that that's looking at the social determinants of health and understanding that our connection to the land is one of the key reasons for why our disconnection from the land often is one of the key reasons for why our health and well-being for people of color is such a drastic difference from settler communities and folks who are of settler descent. It's starkly, dramatically contrasting, and the way that I experienced that throughout my life was unfortunately through the witnessing many of my family members passing away at a very young age, comparatively speaking, including my mother. So the reason that I do what I do is because of those dualities of understanding, like being a person who was literally initiated into the forest. That's my first several breaths of my life were taken in forests. And so having that really in me as just as a person in general, but also seeing how that disconnect from land has led to so many deficits in our health and well-being. And when I started working in advancing justice, I realized that I worked with a clinic called Judas Place at Six Nations, which is a collaborative clinic that combines traditional medicine and Western medicine with a Mohawk doctor and a Cuba medicine helper. And Elva and Karen, Sego, I know that you're not watching, but just to give them some props. And really it was there at Six Nations at Judas Place where I started to see this theme and this pattern emerge of complex healthcare issues, complex presentations of really complex medical issues that were tons of different comorbidities that were a result of systemic racism, internalized oppression, lateral violence, and environmental racism. So there's this like really interesting and terrifying admixture of reasons for why people have their health has devolved so deeply. And once I started seeing this land connection, as far as where we get our food, how we eat our food, even just like having access to places to be able to move our bodies and pick up the roles and responsibilities of who we were and are as a people, and to be able to exercise those, everything that Annie is doing is engaging those parts of ourselves that we didn't have the privilege of being able to engage for a long time. And for many reasons, it wasn't safe, right? There's a lot of reasons for why we wouldn't go back to these places alone. Being a person of color and going on a hike is not a fun experience often. So, we were relegated to being known as in historical senses as guides and as like, the myth of the Indigenous person on the land. And my goal has been to restore these relationships, whether they be at NEFOC doing, agroforestry and working to reconnect Indigenous people to land, and also to connect Black, Indigenous, and people of color to the land together, right, in a way that's healing all of those intersecting legacies. And most recently, I've been able to I have the privilege and the opportunity to work with the Nature Conservancy New York with Peg Olson and Amanda Ellie and a bunch of other really wonderful folks at the Center for, in a collaboration with the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment, with a project that my PhD is focused on, which is called biocultural restoration, which is a very condensed term that means a lot of different things, but basically it's looking at the existing stories of what it means to be Haudenosaunee on land in not just the Adirondacks, but in the entire sort of area that TNC has preserves in New York State, and to sort of take down those no trespassing signs for us, right? Like I constantly kind of wonder and think, what would this land be like right now if we were still able to steward it, if we were still able to care for the land? There's so much of our presence missing there. And because we are not picking up those responsibilities to the land that we have since time immemorial, you can see many impacts on the land. And globally, you can see, there's that sort of widely cited statistic about biodiversity and Indigenous land stewardship being, 5% of the people are stewarding 80% of the biodiversity. And that's, been cited many times. And what I'm here to do is to see, sort of like hold my beer, right? Like, let's get out and do the things that we've been craving to reconnect with. Let's go and find the medicines that we know are there, that are only happen in the Adirondacks, right? Or all of the just cross-cultural collaborations that we can use to, I was just talking about this earlier with our biocultural restoration class. It's about cross-cultural collaboration that's using traditional ecological knowledge and scientific ecological knowledge in a synergistic way to be able to elevate each of those spheres in order to be able to advance a new story together that will build climate resilience, that will build better health and well-being indicators for all people and the land and the non-human beings of the land, and to heal relationships that, that reintegrate our presence, our lived continued presence on the land. There's so much to be said for what it would mean to have our stories be seen and told, and to have those lived experiences, to share those in a way that feels like a reconnection and a reclamation. So restoring is something, it's more than just ecological restoration for the sake of healing something that was harmed. My PhD specifically is focusing on things that were never truly polluted. For example, we could look at, there's lots of ecological restoration processes that are harming or healing harmed land. And I'll say that the harm for this land is that we were cut off from it. So there's a whole other type of colonial violence that happens in not only the displacement and removal of us from land, but also the erasure of our presence on that land. It tells us a story that we don't belong, that we didn't ever have a relationship with this place. And Annie, I know the feeling that you're feeling is remembering in a way, it's a special place. And Benita, what you're feeling is this beautiful healing connection that is what this place offers. So it's a really wonderful reciprocal way of, I think, expressing cross-cultural collaboration and healing.
Benita or Annie, we'd love to hear a bit about, how your work intersects with these issues of access and inclusivity in the Adirondacks and beyond. I think Stephanie has communicated that, the cross-cultural element is so critical to bringing people from all walks of life. So I know that both of you have direct experience with this, and I know the audience would like to hear more about that.
You want to go, Annie?
Sure. A lot of my work is mostly going out there, like getting out there, getting in the field, making relationships with, stewards of the land that are there now, and, helping me find these amazing places where I'm able to do a camp or a workshop, or, you know, like showing me these secret spaces that are not on, you know, Saranac tourist website, you know, this is where all the people are, you know. But there are a few that have helped me, especially in the last 2 years, helped me find those hidden gems. Because I started bringing my summer camps out there. I started bringing hiking groups, regular hiking groups, little beginner hiking groups, you know. I spent a great deal hiking with my 2 small children. You know, they're now 8 and 10, but when we started, my daughter, she was like 3 when she started hiking. So she's pretty, they're both pretty seasoned hikers, you know. So watching them and how much I kind of underestimated them, you know, has kind of fueled a lot of getting those moms that really need that, you know, that outdoor, especially with babies, helping them get out there and enjoy the nature and connect and try and help with whatever postpartum or, you know, anything that they're having, but giving them a safe space to feel safe with their little ones, or to get out of the house and feel it's okay to not know what you're doing, because we're gonna be here to support you, you know. And I started like a borrowing closet, so that a lot of these moms that can't really afford those big expensive hiking carriers, or maybe they don't they won't like it, you know, it gives them a chance to come in and try it. And, you know, I will go out with them if they need be. I will show them how to adjust it, get it set, and get them out there and get them moving, you know. So a lot of it is because I do work for a fitness program. One of our main focuses is movement, you know. So I have seen in the past few years, you know, a lot of our youth, you know, they gain a little weight and it's like, oh, you can't eat this, you got to get moving there, you know. And reality is, a lot of times it's an underlining factor, you know, something's going on with them. Let's look at what it is that's making them feel this way. Let's, you know, let's not send them to the gym and almost like in a shameful way, but, you know, let's find what's going to get them to feel that. And I find that a lot of times my participants, they feel better when we go hiking. You know, they feel better being out there and be able to have that chance to talk it out, you know, to talk about it. And these places that are not super popular and overpopulated at the time, because there are a few times where we've hit a summit and there's like 20 people there, you know. It doesn't give you the same sense as if you hit that summit and it's just you in that group. You know, if it's just you in that group, it gives you that time to kind of open up and do that talking circle and be there in that moment and help, you know, not point it out like, oh, we've noticed, you know, like kind of give them a chance to open up when they're ready, or just give them a chance to be there in the present. You know, and doing this, I've noticed that it's not just our youth that feel that way, you know. So that's why I totally agree with Stephanie and Benita. It's the root, you know, like sometimes, and I believe, and I'm a big believer that I like to work with families rather than one or the other, because then when we do a lot of the healing and the hiking and, you know, that connection, the medicine walk, the healing hike, the mindfulness, you know, all of that. When we do that with families, it gives you more root to build those healthy habits within that family, because we can teach the youth all they want, but if it's not kind of carried over with the parents, it kind of stops after a while, you know? So if we're going straight to the root and doing it together, we're kind of building that as one, you know, like, so yeah, a lot of what I do now is we go out into the Adirondacks. We do try to find those spots. We look for them, you know, and it's a lot of the medicines that we've been doing this year. We focused on finding those bodies of water where boats are not permitted with motors, you know. One of the big ones is, you know, we had a big, huge conversation about cattails, you know, and how that the root where the medicine is, that actually absorbs all of the toxins in the water. So if you're getting your medicine from, you know, like the St. Lawrence where we live, you know, there's a shipping channel that is like a popular route, you know, like it's hard to make sure that, you know, it's from a body where there's no motor oil in the water, you know? So that is a big part of what we're trying to show the difference in with our youth as well, and our families, and just, you know, planting these little seeds here and there where we can, and hoping, you know, like they grow. So, yeah.
Please, thank you so much, Annie. And I can imagine those seeds do grow, and that must be a great joy to see that happen. And Benita, we'd also love to hear from you about how your work with groups like Outdoor Afro intersects and engages with these challenges of access and inclusivity.
Well, just hearing Annie talk about how she brings people from the reservation into the Adirondacks, and knowing that, you know, you can't put kids in boats on you know, and have them enjoy being on the St. Lawrence. And at least when he brings them into the Adirondacks, they're quiet lakes and places where they can really commune with nature. For me, a lot of the folks that I brought up to the Adirondacks, they've associated the Adirondacks with correctional facilities. A lot of them have never been to the Adirondacks other than to go to Dannemora or you know, Franklin Correctional Facility, any of the ones that are up the Gouverneur. And they've had bad experiences when they've gone there. They've gone there and they've been made to feel like, you know, we don't want you to stay. We don't even want you to come visit. And even when they, you know, are in the towns don't make them feel welcome. And, you know, there have been many incidents in the past where people have driven up and been stopped by state troopers and not treated very well. So it takes a bit for me to convince people to come up. The Adirondack experience allowed me to access to a bus each month this summer. And I've been able to bring people up from the from Albany area, excuse me. And most people are kind of hesitant. So I get a lot of questions before I actually get them on the bus. And then when they get on the bus, I give them some history of the Adirondacks. I let them know that we've been there. We are not just in prisons. We're currently there. We've been there. And, you know, we've had settlements in the Adirondacks, and they're usually really happy to hear that, and they feel a bit relieved, because when you come to the Adirondacks, you don't see very many people of color. We don't own we do own a few businesses up there, but it's not obvious. And the few that are there working in other people's businesses, there are more people working in businesses, people of color working in businesses in the Adirondacks since COVID than any other time I've ever seen up there. And so, but just for them to go into a business and see a person of color makes them feel a lot more welcome. The people that I've brought up with Outdoor Afro, one of the components when we Outdoor Afro is about connecting people to nature, creating leaders in nature. So I teach them leave no trace. I really try to introduce them to a variety of different activities so that they'll feel comfortable in nature, camping, hiking, biking, snowshoeing, skiing, any number of activities that will help them feel comfortable. And I teach them the right way. But I also teach them Black history. So wherever I bring them, I let them know what the Black history is in that particular area. And unfortunately, you know, there isn't a lot on display in many places. The Adirondack experience has done so much to make the people that I bring up feel welcome. And I've gotten comments from the people I brought up, and they've said it didn't feel like they, you know, it felt natural, let's put it that way, that the staff made them feel welcome, that the space felt comfortable. And there were subtle things that made them feel like, you know, this is something they've been, you know, it's not hard for them to do. I mean, one woman mentioned that she went in the bookstore and there were books about people of color in the Adirondacks. There were children's books, you know, about camping and hiking, and they had people of color in the books. They had Native American people in the books. There were exhibits in the museum that were about Native people, that were about people of color who've been in the Adirondacks. She even mentioned that when her child went into the play area for kids, there were 2 Black dolls. Usually, you know, when our kids go places, there's always white dolls, but you never see Black dolls or Native dolls or Latino dolls. And yet these things were there. And it really made them feel welcome. So for me, just getting people up there is hard because transportation's an issue. The fact that the Adirondack experience in particular, well, the Adirondacks from Albany is probably an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to get to the lower part of the Adirondacks. But to tell people to go there, they won't drive. It surprised me how many people were on the bus who own cars and said they wouldn't drive there. There's, you know, unless there's a bus, they wouldn't drive. And then the other thing was they felt so comfortable having a group of people that looked like them. They felt safer because they were communing with their own, and they could laugh and they could be themselves and not have to worry about people looking at them funny. Someone recently asked me, you know, what are some of the things that could happen up in the Adirondacks that would make people feel comfortable? I mean, if you walk into a place and you see pictures by people from your ethnicity, or you hear music from your culture, or, you know, those are some of the things that, you know, let someone know that, hey, you're welcome. We are learning about who you are. We listen to your music. We collect your art, or we enjoy your art, or, you know, just subtle little things. And the fact that those 2 little dolls were in the play area really made a big difference for these kids. Equipment. I've got a basement full of tents and sleeping bags because most people can't afford it. And I've been blessed that people have given me sleeping bags and tents, although now my basement isn't my basement anymore, it's a storage facility. But those are some of the things that I think would really make a difference in helping, you know, people of color come. I do a first-time camper program, but the folks that I bring on first-time camper program, I've given them equipment to keep, and they have yet, only one person is actually, I think we've had at least 16 families I've done a first-time camper program with. And I can honestly say only one of the families has actually gone camping on their own. They felt comfortable having a community where there are people like themselves around them, because there are all kinds of subtle signs that say, we don't want you here. When you drive into a town and you see you see Trump Pence signs, you see Trump 2024 signs, you see Confederate signs, you even see the American flag. And in a lot of ways, now the American flag means, hey, I'm a conservative person who really doesn't want to see you here. And so it's sad that the American flag has come to mean that to those of us of color when we walk into places, because we really don't know what it really, why are you showing it? It's almost like the American flag's a way of saying, we don't want you here, you're not American, you're not one of the people we want in this area. So those are some of the things that we've been dealing with. And I can honestly say that when I bring kids into those communities and they see those things, you know, I really have to find a way to comfort them and let them know that it's okay for us to be here. We have every right to be here. I've never felt that I don't belong in the Adirondacks. And I've moved around for 32 years, around 33 years around in the Adirondacks. But I understand why Black men don't feel comfortable, how people who've gone to correctional facilities, you know, really don't want to be up there by themselves. I do understand that, but I strongly feel like I have every right to be there, and I move around in that way. So.
Thank you so much, Benita. And while I'll just ask one more time, please feel free to submit any questions you may have for Benita, Annie, and Stephanie. But in the meantime, sort of looking towards the future, I wonder if each of you could speak to, you know, what possibilities or opportunities do you foresee that would help us move closer to this founding ideal, if only in rhetoric, at the time that the Adirondacks were preserved for, and I quote, the free use of all the people for their health and pleasure. What opportunities do you see, you know, that are maybe unfolding at the moment or on the horizon that give you hope that we can move towards a more positive direction?
I think with climate change, that is a critical call to all of us. And I think if we are to make a difference, I mean, we're so blessed to have 6 million acres of land in this state that we've preserved. And we need to take this time to, one, give more people access so that, I mean, you won't want to protect something that you don't know about, that you can't touch, you can't smell, you can't see. And so that's important for us to connect people to that. But climate change should make us want to band together more to save this planet. And so I'm hoping that because of all the things we're learning and about the impact of climate change, you know, people will open their minds and their hearts and realize that we need to unify, not, you know, keep people out or fight with each other. It's about the planet. It's about our health. It's about the well-being of, it's about the ecology of this planet and the people, and saving the people too, because if we don't address climate change, our health is in jeopardy. So I don't know, I just see this as a great opportunity for education, for unifying, for us to all use this to rally. And I hope this critical issue brings us together.
I think in order to be able to, how would I say this? In order to be able to heal forward in the future, we need to heal the past. One of the things that I'm doing in this project with community is connecting with a place called Follinsby Pond, which is a great example of a place in the Adirondacks that's been made famous for its, what would I say, the presence of Western philosophers, right? There's this place on Follinsby Pond called the Philosopher's Camp, and it's what it's most known for. First of all, Follinsby Pond has a different name that we should, and we're looking at understanding what was the name of Follinsby Pond, and also knowing that folks like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who really kind of was the person who made Follinsby Pond famous, also did a horrible amount of damage to our presence at Follansbee with one single statement. He said, "We climbed the bank and in the twilight of the forest noon wheeled the first axe those echoes ever heard." And it's a myth that kind of built itself over a period of years where, you know, Martin Ives said in 1899 that on leaving Saratoga, one enters at once, if he travels north, a country where every rock, tree, and hill has an Aboriginal history. And then progressively speaking, moving into just 1921, which is just a mere, 22 years later, Alfred Donaldson said, "The consensus of authoritative opinion seems to be that the Indians never made any part of what is now the Adirondack Park their permanent home." So what does that say about what is the need, right? What was the need to do that? There are many reasons, and most of them, if not all, were extractive. So to think about now hearing the term free use and enjoyment by settlers is a little triggering. It's a little maybe too soon to say that still, when there aren't any relational places right now, or there are very few where we can heal those relationships. To hear, "We're going to share this park with you," is kind of weird. So to think about it from the other perspective of, we recognize in this potential, like say land acknowledgement, it's not just about acknowledging our continued presence, but how are you repairing those relationships? How are you showing up in a way that manifests an actionable acknowledgement of land and people who the land gave, it supports, and the land has given us everything. The land gave us our languages, our cosmologies, our spiritualities, our sustenance, our life ways, everything that we've lived in and worn all comes from the land. And you can see it evidenced in so many things. My goal isn't to prove that we ever had a relationship with the Adirondacks, but to really see that there are some ouches there still, there's some oopses and some ouches that need to be healed before that positive experience that y'all are trying to cultivate in the Adirondacks is actually positive for everybody. So to think about and to confront the violent colonial histories that created this now like park that is completely cut off from Indigenous land stewardship, and to understand that, there was a reason for why all these correctional facilities were put up there. And now that we have this collective experience that can honestly be quite negative sometimes, like Benita was saying, that we don't feel safe or we feel erased or whatever it might be, but that there are folks out there like yourselves who are wanting to rebuild those bridges and to just do your best. And I think that's really what we need to do. So for example, at Follansbee Pond, that's one of my research sites where we're going to be bringing a bunch of community and restoring that relationship with the philosophers camp, which is to build an Indigenous philosophers camp there together, and to bring some of our most revered knowledge keepers and philosophers, not only from our territories, but from potentially other territories, to come and exchange knowledge and build relationships and vision forward together about what that might look like. That's just one out of many different examples. We're doing a medicine picking summer road trip with a bunch of healers from all over the reserves and territories to pick medicines and laugh and have a good time and, do all the things that we do when we go out in the bush and pick medicines, which is always a crazy and fun experience. So to know that we're able to at least begin building those bridges together is really important. And I'll say, I love hiking, but I was laughing. We have a Justice for the Land gathering with the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment, TNC, and a bunch of folks. And I think it was Sid Hill, Tadadaho, who was on a Zoom with us talking about another issue, but they said, one of the things, I think it was said, I can't be 100% about this person who it was, but somebody said, "I don't know any Indian who's hiked 25 miles into the bush and came back with nothing." Like we're going out. If you come back with nothing, you better come back with something. So to see hunting and fishing or medicines, that's so great. You know, it's so important for us to be able to do those things. And yeah.
For me, I think the connections we made with our group and our meetings, I will definitely work on seeing how I would be able to, you know, do stuff with Benita or Stephanie, you know, to build our own, you know, like build it up from where we are now. And I'll continue to go in and ask those questions, you know. I'll go into the facilities and ask, you know, what about this? What about that? You know, and I'll continue to try to look for those places that, you know, those, they say like the locals know, you know, where it is almost like sacred places because there isn't anybody there, you know. I'll continue to try to highlight these areas and post about them and continue to share them with my community. I just think that you have to start somewhere, you know, like I have talked about it for so long before, you know, before I started, it was all research and looking up and reading and, you know, and then you get there and it's not exactly what you expected it to be. So that's why I said, I'm gonna get in my car and I'm gonna go check, you know, I'm gonna get in my car, I'm gonna meet this person. You know, it's, to me, that's more like it builds. So as I learn, I share, you know, like I don't want to have all of this incredible information about all these incredible places and not share it, you know. I just feel like there's so many things that, you know, we always take the research part, you know, we always take those back steps. We always kind of, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I doubted myself at first, you know, and then once you start to get out there and once you start to do it, you know, it just, you can't stop, you know, like now it's like just become who I am and who I want our community to see, you know, like there's so much out there, there's so much to see and there's so much to tap into, you know, like yeah, I think that we're gonna move forward. We're all gonna move forward, and listening to everybody speak tonight, you know, I hope I get to see it all, you know, like I hope to get to see the change and, you know, be there to see everything that you ladies are doing. Eric, this is huge. Like, this is a really good start, you know. So I think as long as we continue to do what we're doing, you know, step by step, we're inching in, we're changing it, we're pushing forward, you know, every little bit and every little, you know, every new person we bring in there from our areas, it brings more diversity there, you know, even if it's one person a year, 2 people, 2 years, you know, it's gonna grow. Sometimes those people sometimes that person's going to bring their friend and then their friend will bring their friend. And, you know, like it is, you know, I think it's going to continue to move forward regardless, you know.
But you know, the other thing is that I think it would be, I'm glad we're talking and we will continue to talk and work together. but I think we need to interact with the people who live here also more, so they'll
Yeah.
learn about us. So it
Yeah.
would be great to work with the kids. Like when I bring kids up, I really want to try to find some opportunities to have kids from the inner city interact with the kids up here. If maybe we can figure out some ways, and people have talked to me about maybe we can find ways to bring kids down to Albany, have Albany kids come up here, so that they'll, you know, when you don't interact with people who are different from you, you have misconceptions about them. So I want the folks that bring up, I want them to understand, you know, the native lives and to understand a lot about the culture and the health ways and, you know, this history and the things that have gone on here. But I also want kids from the city to understand, you know, what life is like for anybody who lives up here, not just people of color. And I want the people up here who live year round to start to interact with. So, I mean, if we can start to create some forums where people are interacting with each other more, then hopefully that will get folks to become friends, to learn about each other, to have conversations. Because when you don't, I grew up in New York City, and the neighborhood I grew up in was so diverse. And, you know, I had friends of every race that was in New York City at the time. And I see that as a blessing because I got to eat their food and learn about their, you know, their traditions and their culture and so on. And I think if we can do more of that, then that will help us heal more too, for people to not be in isolation and to start to connect a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a beautiful vision, Benita, no question. I want to turn to a question from audience members, and please feel free to submit them as we work on this first question from my great friends from the Talking Wing Storytelling Group, Blake and Sinsoon. Thank you so much to all the speakers, healers, and teachers for everything they shared. One question. As we know, the Adirondack Park was envisioned and imposed by white men, primarily from urban areas, who wanted to, quote, manage the natural world for their gain. If you would envision another term or word to refer to the, quote, park as a healing and nourishing place, what might that be? What language or words could we use to describe this vital and special land, water, and the life they sustain? Very provocative question.
Hi, Blake and Sinsoon. I know you. Good to see that you're here. Well, part of the work I'm doing with our communities, and I'm sure that we'll be discussing to Annie and Benita and everybody that I'm working with for this project with CNPE, is to start to kind of overlay the maps of that we have for place names over the current maps that are now making up the park. And part of the work of biocultural restoration and restoration is about bringing those place names forward and speaking them out again on the land. And for us, that means a collective community engagement process. Really, it's not about one person. We were just talking about this during the class today, is that it's hard for me to project my own visions and thoughts onto things, because everything that we do is so deeply rooted in community engagement and ensuring that the voices of the land and the people are heard versus just one person's projections. So we were doing a rights of nature thought project, which is also something I would love to see happen. And I know that Blake and Sinsoon, that you're very involved with the rights of nature on the St. Lawrence River, for example. So I'm going to say I don't know, because the land hasn't told the community yet, right? But I do think that it would include and incorporate the languages that the land inspired. And that'll be a collective process that I'm really excited to be able to participate in some way.
A shout out to Annie here from one of our audience members. Akwesasne loves you, Annie. So some love from your community here who are tuning in. Not so much a question, but a very nice comment here. The panelists should be commended for what they're all doing in making the Adirondacks enjoyable for all, even if the gains are doing so in total. The progress they are making people more knowledgeable as to what happened in the past and how it can improve for all. Keep up the great work you're all doing. It's moving many forward to a better place. That's great to hear. Well, we are slightly over time, so I just want to say thank you so much to Stephanie, Annie, and Benita for taking the time to be with us here this evening and having this very rich and important conversation that I hope will continue in forums like these and others in the Adirondacks and beyond. A quick plug that we'll have our final symposium discussion panel this coming Friday, which will be led by Aaron Mayer from the Adirondack Council. We hope you will tune into that. That will be this Friday at 7 p.m. We hope to see you all there. And I would just say one more time, my heartfelt gratitude. Thank you so much, Benita, Annie, Stephanie. Thank you so much for all who attended our program this evening. We so appreciate your support. And we hope you see you again this coming Friday. But I hope everyone has a great night, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice meeting all of you. And thanks a lot, Eric.
We'll
Thanks
stay in
everybody
touch.
for coming. Yeah, please reach out. I'll be in touch as well.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.